In today's video, we'll be looking at Good Dye Young in the color Blue Ruin. I have my swatches labeled 1 through 12, but that is not synonymous with hair levels. I do pictures and clips near the end of the video, so the numbers just help us keep track of each swatch. Also, these are human hair swatches, but the only one that is virgin hair is the number 4 black swatch. The rest have been chemically dyed or bleached at some point in their existence. Number 1 is like an orangey red. I don't have any orange swatches, but blue and orange are across from each other on the color wheel, so I wanted to see what the blue would look like over a more orangey toned red. 2 is gray, 3 is a natural red, 4 again is black, and then that goes up to 11, which is a range that goes to platinum blonde, and then number 12 is like a toned version of number 11. So I'll be starting by taking the dye directly out of the container and putting it at the top of each swatch. Some people do like to dilute their dyes, so I'll be doing a diluted version of that at the bottom of each swatch as well. Please keep in mind that everyone's hair is different, which means everyone's hair will take dye differently. So just use my video as a reference as to how it could possibly turn out for you. And that also goes for things like monitors and screens, because they can make the undertones especially look quite different between devices. For the diluted section, it's going to sound like kind of a lot, but we're going to do an 8:1 ratio. So far, the Blue Ruin seems to be quite pigmented. If you're not sure what diluter is, simple answer, I guess, is that it essentially lightens the color of the dye. And if you're wondering, I just use a plain white conditioner for diluting. Okay, so we're gonna let these sit for about 3 hours. I will then rinse them out, and I will meet you back here and we can do some comparisons. So if you were wondering, this dye is actually very, very pigmented. You can see it actually stained the top of number 3 over here, where it was white before. So number 1 was that orangey-ish red. Under intense light, it does still look kind of blue, but from a distance, it almost looks black. Number 2 has a similar look to number 12. They both are pretty cool tone looking. Number 3 is a very similar look to number 1. The bottom half looks maybe slightly more green looking for the diluted section, but overall it's almost a black that it turned out. 4 obviously is black, and then a similar thing happened to number 5. It looks super, super dark, even darker than it probably was before actually. I feel like you can't really truly see the blue until you get to number 9. 6, 7, and 8 all did take the color, but I feel like it's actually more apparent on the diluted section because the top half looks so incredibly dark, but at the same time, the hair underneath is a little bit too warm for it to stay blue looking on the diluted section. So again, it's not till you get to number 9 and later for it to look blue on both the direct dye and the diluted section. And then I would say my favorites are probably 10 and up, and then obviously number 2. 9 still does look good. It's just the lighter the blonde underneath gets, the more true the tone looks. I will say the interesting thing about this color is that on the website it looks closer to maybe the diluted section on the model, but the direct dye portion is much, much darker than what they show. So that could just be my hair, but I'm not really sure. Make sure you do your research before just going and buying dyes, of course. But that's why I do these videos. So like I said earlier in the video, I like to do comparisons, and we're gonna start with Manic Panic in the color After Midnight. This is comparable to number 12. This is comparable to number 11. This is comparable to number 10. And this is comparable to number 9. So the reason I chose After Midnight is, firstly, I feel like when people hear After Midnight, they expect a color that actually is closer to the Blue Ruin than the After Midnight color. After Midnight still holds a little bit more green in it than I think most people expect. But that being said, I did want to compare the top direct dye portion to the diluted section for the Blue Ruin. Alright, so I went ahead and I pulled the swatches down, and then I took a piece of paper to cover up the diluted section as well. I felt like that greeny blue color that it was turning as the strand went down was a little bit distracting. Now, I wouldn't say that this is an exact match for the diluted section, but it is pretty close. Again, the After Midnight seems to hold just a slight bit more of green versus the Blue Ruin. Blue Ruin seems to be very cool toned. Now, the other reason I wanted to compare After Midnight is because I actually did a mix with After Midnight and Ultraviolet, and I feel like that mixture turned out a lot more similar to the top half. Now, I'm not sure I'm remembering it correctly, but I believe that this swatch that I'm about to lay down is equal parts Ultraviolet and After Midnight, but I could be wrong. Regardless, it still looks pretty similar to the other swatches I did, but that's this one. I will link that video below in case you're wondering what the ratios are, because I really cannot remember, and I'm sorry about that. But what's interesting is that the mixture still looks a little bit more blue in comparison to the Blue Ruin direct dye. I honestly feel like if you added more Ultraviolet to this mixture here, it could look similar to the Blue Ruin. But either way, I feel like this mixture here is a little bit closer to what it looks like online on the model's hair. So just trying to give you options, basically. The other comparison I wanted to try today is Lunar Tides in the color Blue Velvet. This is comparable to number 12. This is comparable to number 11. This is comparable to number 10. And this is comparable to number 9. Now, I've never made hair dye myself, of course, so my theory could be wrong, but I have a theory that they tried really hard to keep the Blue Ruin as cool tone as possible, and that ended up making it look almost like an indigo color on the direct dye portion, so that when it fades, it doesn't look more like this greenish blue. And with that, it ended up making the direct dye portion more of like an indigo color. Blue Velvet to me is kind of what I was expecting the Blue Ruin to look a little bit more like, but now I see just how cool toned the Blue Ruin really leans. But honestly, it's still pretty dark in my opinion. I think you would definitely have to dilute it to get that initial bluish color that they show on the website. But I know some people do like to dye their hair darker so that when it fades, it's the color that they want. So that could be the goal here too. But I will applaud it for just how pigmented it really is. You can see the Blue Velvet does a really good job dyeing the direct dye portion for like 9 and 10. But the diluted sections start to get very green and maybe like unintentional looking. Whereas like I said, on the number 9, it still looks pretty good on both the top and the bottom. But yeah, just wanted to compare this one because I felt like this is what I intended, or what I thought that the Blue Ruin would look like when buying this dye. Now, usually I like to only do 2 comparisons per video so that my videos don't run too long, but I did quickly want to throw this one in here as well. This is by the brand Splat in the color Midnight Indigo, and this is comparable to number 11. So the top half is obviously a lot darker, and then the diluted section looks a lot more similar to the direct dye portion for Blue Ruin. But honestly, I do think the Midnight Indigo from Splat does lean even more cool tone. Like the top half looks slightly more purpley than the Blue Ruin does. So then as this fades, you can see more of that like sapphire-y, cobalt-y kind of blue coming through. But I thought this would be an honorable mention in case you're trying to find a dupe for something or one one's easier for you to get, you know, whatever. All right, so now I'm gonna get into the before and after clips. Those, as well as everything after this point in the video, will be done with natural lighting. And I'm sure, as you know, recreating the exact same environment with natural lighting on different days can be a little bit difficult. So if anything looks slightly off, that's probably why. So I really hope this video helped. If you have a request, I do have a link below to a Google form you can fill out. Just remember, I only do dyes that do not test on animals. Thank you so much to my patrons, and thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in my next video.